Hello everyone, my name is Zach, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well today. Today I'm coming to you from the great outdoors to film a great little tag that was created by Megan, MookieReads. I'll leave a link to her channel in the description, and that is the Florida book tag. Now, being born and raised in Florida, I could not resist doing this tag, but I figured if I was going to do a tag about Florida, the only way to do it properly would be to come out here in the heat and humidity and film it outside. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to apologize if you can hear children screaming in the background. I'm filming in a little park. I'm in a secluded little corner back here, but down there's a playground and there's an area by the lake where there's like a summer camp trip or something. I tried to film this yesterday when there was less people and a thunderstorm rolled in, so we're making do with what we have today, so we're doing this now, and let's just get into the questions. So the first question is mosquitoes, and a quick note to Megan, mosquitoes is a good one, but I think love bugs would have been a more Floridian category to go with. For those of you who don't know, 2 months out of the year, usually like May and September, these little cretins roll in. They are bugs. They're considered semi-invasive. They don't bite, but they mate and they fuse together, and there are tons of them. They get all over your house and they splat all over your car when you drive, and they're super annoying to deal with. So that I think is a little more Floridian than mosquitoes, but the mosquitoes are bad here too. The question for mosquitoes is a book you can't seem to get away from. And I would definitely say ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas. Fun fact, one of the first videos I ever saw was actually Paperback Dream's rant review of ACOTAR, which sadly you can't watch anymore. Cat, can you put it back? Or send me a link to the private video, whichever. I'm feeling nostalgic. But since seeing that video, it seems like I can't stop hearing about ACOTAR. I see people doing rant reviews, and then you have people who unabashedly love the book. You have people who admit it's problematic, but they love it anyway. It's one of those books that everyone seems to read, and I just can't get away from it. I don't really plan on reading it because it's a lot more fun to watch you all just kind of argue with only some context as to what you're talking about, but yeah, definitely a book I can't get away from. Court of Thorns and Roses. Question number 2 is Hurricane Party, and I love this category. For those of you who don't know, in Florida, when the hurricanes roll in, a lot of the times people will get together and gather in one house and just kind of hang out and ride the storm out. I got the pleasure of explaining this to some out-of-state students my freshman year of college, and they thought it was just the weirdest thing, and everyone who was raised in Florida knew it was super common and not a big deal. So it's definitely one of those Floridian things. So Megan, good job on that one. But the question for a Hurricane Party is a book with an amazing cast of characters. I was tempted to say Six of Crows, but I feel like that's the easy and obvious answer. And then I was going to say Deadline by Mira Grant, the second book in the Newsflash trilogy, but I feel like I talk about that series too much. So finally I decided to talk about Dracula by Bram Stoker. This, of course, is a horror classic, but there are quite a few characters, and they're distinct from one another, and they all have their own sort of role in the story. They all sort of react differently, but they all put in the work, they all come together, and they all, work hard to defeat Dracula. Plus the book features Van Helsing, who in my opinion is one of the greatest, most interesting characters ever written, and I love him, so definitely gonna go with Dracula. Category number 3 is a Florida man. Florida man. The question for this is a weird book. And for this question, I'm gonna go with From a Buick 6 by Stephen King.
So Doofus here got the title wrong. It's not From a Buick 6, it's From a Buick 8. From a Buick 6 is actually a Bob Dylan song, which the book is named after. So it wasn't that big of an error, but he's still wrong.
This book is about a police station that captures a Buick that is mysteriously abandoned at a gas station, and the Buick starts to make mysterious things happen, and mysterious things start appearing and disappearing around the Buick, and there's lights, and the temperature is going crazy, and it's really weird. A lot of people don't like this one, especially King fans, but I found it really interesting. The horror was a lot more ethereal and kind of vague and ominous than I felt a lot of Stephen King books are. Stephen King likes to hit you with like a real threat that's right there coming for you. And this threat that you kind of know where it is, but not what it's going to do and when, I thought was kind of an interesting twist on the usual horror when you're not sure when a monster is going to strike or where it is. Question number 4 is Weeki Wachee. Yes, that is a real thing in Florida. So is Yeehaw Junction, if you didn't know. And the question for Weeki Wachee is a book featuring merfolk or other sea creatures. This one was kind of a struggle to come up with. I haven't really read many books with mermaids in it that I remembered, but then I remembered that Peter and the Starcatchers by Ridley Pearson, I think. Peter and the Starcatchers is a retelling of Peter Pan. It's pretty interesting. It's very different than the original fairy tale, but I really enjoyed it as a kid. I haven't read these books in years, so I don't know if they hold up at all, but to my knowledge, that's the only real book I've read that has merfolk in it, but I do plan on reading Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. Question number 5 is The Gulf Coast, favorite book featuring the beach. So I don't really read a lot of contemporary or literary fiction, so a lot of books I read don't really take place in the real world, so the beach isn't really a thing in a lot of the books I read. But one book that I remember has a beach that is featured quite a bit in it is Catching Fire, the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy. There's the little beach around the lake. It has been years since I've read Catching Fire, but I really enjoyed Catching Fire back in the day, so that was the only one that came to mind that really has much of a beach. Question number 6 is The Forgotten Coast, an underrated book. For this one, I'm going to go with Dean Koontz' Frankenstein, specifically book 1, because it's the only one I've read, but it's a 5-book series. A lot of people on BookTube seem to like Frankenstein, and a lot of people really like retellings, but for some reason, this retelling of Frankenstein has seemed to kind of slip under a lot of people's radar. But I read the first book, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great way of working in elements of the original Frankenstein, but telling a new story and bringing in new and old ideas. And if you like Frankenstein as like a franchise, but maybe didn't like the original, or if you love the original and want to get your hands on some more Frankenstein stuff, definitely look into Dean Koontz' Frankenstein. Question number 7 is Sunscreen and Sunburns. Quick pro tip from a Floridian for all you tourists. If you go to the beach, make sure you put sunscreen on your ears and on your feet. You will regret it if you don't. We've learned from experience. Trust us. Anyway, the question for Sunscreen and Sunburns is a book that has stuck with you. For this one, I'm definitely going to say The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I know quite a few people seem to not really like this classic, but I read it for the first time in 8th grade, and the kind of message about how your name has such a big impact on you and the things kind of tied to your name really stuck with me in middle school, where like rumors and things said about you and what people think about you is kind of your whole life. And it's the only book I've read for school that I have reread after high school. So I really enjoy this play. I think it's really powerful. It's sad, but you know, if you kind of know the story behind the events that inspired the book and the events that inspired Arthur Miller to write it, they were both very sad as well, so it kind of makes sense. Question number 8 is the Sunshine State. Florida is known as the Sunshine State, but in my opinion, it should either be called the Humidity State, the Dumb Weather State, or the Theme Park State. Which one of those? I don't really know, but definitely not the Sunshine State. Can you hear that? The birds are going crazy. I'm sorry. The question for the Sunshine State is a book you can't make up your mind about. And for this one, I'm going to say Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Here's the thing. I read this book in 8th grade. I listened to the audiobook of it, which is read by Will Wheaton, who does a great job, by the way. And I loved the hell out of this book back in 8th grade. It was the book I needed at the time. And I think most people have that story of a book that just hit you, you identified with it, and it just was super right for the time. However, looking back and hearing some people talk about it, I realized that, you know, it does have problems. It's not the greatest when it comes to the romance department, and, you know, it is sort of just endless streams of 80s references. But at the time when I was in 8th grade, that's what I was looking for. And it was definitely a self-insert. I was definitely the nerdy kid who was into retro. And the idea of this nerdy kid who's into retro, who gets the hot girl at the end and saves the day and earns a lot of money, was perfect for me. But now looking back, I can kind of see why it's not the greatest thing ever written. But I still have these like fond memories of it. If I read it for the first time today, I'm not really sure how I would feel about it. So, I don't know. I'm really scared to reread it. I restarted the audiobook around the time the movie came out, which I did not like the movie, by the way. Just gonna say that outright. And I didn't really get that far into it, and I don't really know how I'd feel if I went through the whole thing again. So, Ready Player One, can't decide how I really feel about it. And the last question, question number 9, Retirement Communities, a book that features an elderly character. I didn't want to repeat authors in this list, but I am going to. I'm going to repeat Stephen King and talk about the book The Green Mile. The Green Mile features the story of Paula Edgecombe, who is now elderly, who's kind of telling the story of something that happened to him way back in the day. And the book kind of flips back and forth between current day, where Paula's elderly, and then back in time where the real story takes place. But this was the only real book I could think about that I really loved that featured an elderly character more than just in passing. So anyway, that is it for me today. That is the Florida book tag. Thanks to Megan for creating this tag. It is absolutely hilarious and I loved it. If you liked, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you feel so inclined. Please go check out Megan's channel, and I will see you next time.